We welcome you, and I want to thank our department, Literature, Journalism, Writing, and Languages. This is a series called Diverse Perspectives, and we bring in speakers that kind of open your eyes and challenge your thinking about different realities. And it's a pleasure and an honor to have Don Bartletti today. I count him as a friend, probably known each other 15, 16, 17 years. We've been in photo exhibits together and had adventures in Tijuana. And he just is a person to me that is not only an amazing photographer, but a great human. So he highlights the humanity of an issue that's a hot topic. And I like that. I like seeing the reality of people through a lens that brings us back to who we are as humans. And obviously winning a Pulitzer Prize, that's a big deal. But I mean, now that he's retired, he snaps photos of the stars and he's going on a trip on his motorcycle, and those photos are all Pulitzer Prize winners too. So it's like, you just keep enjoying it. So have a wonderful thinking session here, and there will be a Q&A session after. And welcome, Diana. Come in. You had a front row seat. Yeah, Don's wife's coming. And it's a pleasure to welcome Don.
Thank you, Scott. And I echo what Scott said. We're good friends. We spent time in TJ. We're in a couple of group shows together. I think I taught him a lot of things about photography. Nothing to it, just point and shoot. Yeah. But really, the soul that I want, the heart and soul of photojournalism is what I want to talk to you about today. And you're going to see this hot button issue like you've never seen it before. Because you've never seen it before. You've only heard about it, or read about it, or somebody told you about it, or there's somebody else's opinion that it's human nature, we parrot those we think who know more. And you'll be parroting me, because I know a lot about this subject. But you know what always surprised me was the things I never anticipated about meeting people under stress, people with hopes and dreams face to face. So I'll share some of those. Now, I've been doing this for a long time, and I want to start out showing you images maybe your parents have never seen. This is one of the monoliths that delineate the U.S.-Mexico border. This is the most western one, the only one made of marble. It's in Tijuana. So this is back in the 1979, when you could walk through the schoolyard fence that delineated the border. But, you know, there was equilibrium between the two countries. There was none of this political rancor. So now here's a lesson on how to make photographs that will translate an idea. And the idea, the editorial comment would be, people are pushing against the fence trying to go north. Jonas Salk, whose portrait I made one day, he said, yeah, I know about your work on the border, you know, and he said, you know what the fence is? The fence is like an osmotic membrane. That's where if you put enough pressure on one side, something will come through. And some people did. So this is a good old-fashioned Mexican standoff. But I want to show you, we're looking east. The U.S.-Mexico border is the very right side of the picture. Now, the way I approach photography is I try to see it from 360 degrees. So I try to tell the same story from more than one perspective. So this is the same set of circumstances, people waiting on the border, but I wanted to relate them to San Diego, their destination in the distance. So I went into an abandoned building on the Tijuana side of the border where I could get up high enough so you can barely see the fuzzy the silhouettes. See, there they are. So they're lit by the Border Patrol vehicle you saw in the first picture. Well, protests about the border fence is nothing new. Every single administration has been paying attention to it. Some more discreet than others. But the migration that moves north, some might say it's unstoppable. Some might say we can stop it with a fence. So the first border fences after the schoolyard fence was taken down were these panels, steel panels that I landed helicopters and drove trucks on in Vietnam. There were surplus ones that were erected horizontally along the border to patch the leaky fence. But they were welded together horizontally, much like a ladder. So I call this image Too Hungry to Knock. The smugglers in the striped shirt at the top. There's a door, but nobody's knocking. And when the Border Patrol changed shifts, everybody leaped over and sprinted into their future. But when they encountered I-5 near the border, it was a terrible carnage because smugglers wouldn't take their charges over an overpass thinking the authorities would ambush them there. But the Highway Patrol and the Border Patrol vowed never to do that. But the word never got out. So people were running across this high-speed highway here and up in near San Clemente on Camp Pendleton. So Caltrans called me and said, Don, we've seen your pictures. We would like to create some sort of warning sign about this. Could you send? So I sent them about 6 or 7 photos, and their graphic artist came up with a sign that was posted down here on every freeway within a few miles of the border and up on Camp Pendleton too. It said caution, prohibido. And there were billboards made from exact copies of my pictures that were put up at the rest stop on Camp Pendleton. But this has become an international symbol for lots of ideas and thoughts, and even that one. That's me. But northbound is where everyone was headed. Often, right up I-5. This is Encinitas Boulevard and the Freeway 5. These are 5 Guatemalans. I was working 2 weeks under an NEA grant that came from the Museum of Photographic Arts. So one of my specialties, the reason I was invited, was I paid a lot of attention to these farm worker squatter camps in the hills and valleys of North San Diego County. So I stayed here, I came back 2 nights, and there are 2 brothers in the foreground sleeping on bubble wrap, and there are 3 friends in the back, and one of those guys, he told me, we don't live like this in Guatemala. We have houses, and we have beds, but what we don't have is work and money. So they tried to excuse themselves. We don't live like this, we don't like this. But here we are, because they go down to the intersection where the Big Bear Market is every morning and wait on the curbside for offers of work. This is another farm worker going off to his little hooch down the hill. But I spoke with the man on the high road, and he said, we moved here from Michigan, and I built this brand new house, and I look down there, and every day I see smoke. Every night I see smoke. He thought he had moved adjacent to empty ground, but it was heavily populated with other people. So the reason people are not living in apartments or rooming houses or garages in San Diego County is because rents are ridiculously high. So squatter camps came up all over North County. And this man here, he goes down to El Camino Real in Carlsbad, and a carpet layer picks him up every morning. And another camp in the San Luis Rey Valley. Can you hear me? This thing sounds funny. Okay. In the San Luis Rey Valley, little Gonzalo Lopez, he's only 9 years old. His father built him this basketball hoop. But his basketball court is paved in mud. So is his bedroom and his kitchen in the little house in the background. If you look in the distance on the hill in between the trees, there is a building. It's a dormitory where farm workers who work for the Singh and Sons vine ripened tomato company can live if they have an H-1A visa or they have legal papers. But those who don't, which is probably half of their employees, live in the squatters' camp in the mud banks of the San Luis River. But you know, I find the border and these farm worker camps somewhat like theater, but that's really an insult. You know, they're very visual. But to me, the heart and soul of this issue is always in the faces and the eyes of the people. So I stayed here for one night, overnight. They didn't mind, because after a while people stopped asking me how much do those cameras cost and what do you do and what are you going to do with the pictures, blah blah. And they trusted me, and that is one of the biggest hurdles that I spend most of my time doing, is trying to let people be themselves. And after a while, they were. I call it light touch. This woman cleans houses in Rancho Santa Fe. She leaves the camp every day. Her husband does labor in either nurseries, people's gardens, and others are way down street corners, begging a resident of Fairbanks Ranch for maybe a day of work and a free lunch. This is one of the mansions in Fairbanks Ranch where these farm workers will walk or ride their bicycles for a day of work. But agriculture in San Diego County has been on the back of the migrant laborer for decades. All the flower fields, all the restaurants, you name it. I mean, we all have seen that. And I'm going to show you later on why Americans aren't doing that. You'll be surprised. Then again, you won't. But you haven't heard somebody tell you that other than me. So, in one of these camps, I met Wilfredo Ramirez. He's an immigrant who has been coming to Carlsbad, migrating up to the Napa Valley to pick grapes, migrating back to Carlsbad to pick and hoe weeds in tomato fields on El Camino Real. And one of the hardest problems I had meeting these strangers was refusing their offer of something to drink or something to eat. So I did sit down with Wilfredo, and he's an incredible man. Danny is, he had this easy laugh. He liked to tell jokes, and he invited my wife and I back to his home in Tonalá, Oaxaca. You'll see a little more of that later. So Wilfredo's son came up. He was in the background. Both of them only wear white shirts all the time. They're very well-mannered, very well-spoken, very sincere, not religious. They don't drink. But they send their money back home. So those left behind will have a toehold on their own country. So this is where they come from, Tonalá, Oaxaca. It's a beautiful little town, very quiet, very, hard-working people. But Wilfredo's job when he was back home and not in Carlsbad was herding goats. And he only had white goats, he told me, so I can tell if one of my goats is missing or somebody else has stolen one. But I also met his parents. And his parents' roots are deep, deep, deep in Mexico. They have never gone further than a donkey or a horse ride from their house in Tonalá. They didn't have to. They had everything. It was a very rich farmland. They had animals. But all of their grandchildren and children have gone to Carlsbad. All of them. So during one of their community celebrations, my wife Diana and I went to their home, and we were guests there. We had great meals. I accompanied Wilfredo out into the fields. But then this was incredible. I mean, without any warning, Diana comes around the corner and says, Don, you gotta see this. So I call it filial devotion. In spite of the separation for economic reasons, when the family is back home, they are super, super close. Now, Wilfredo's money, he saved it. Look at this house he's built. So he went from that little, crappy little shack made out of plastic to a 3-story mansion. With what? Money from Carlsbad. So when you wonder, why are these people here? Why do they keep coming? You know why? Because they can't make it alone back home. But remittances, that's money that's sent back to not only the people left behind, but those who hopefully will guard it and save it and enable them to improve their lives in Mexico or Central America. Well, we're back in the camp now. Here's Wilfredo's son. There's also, his name is Wilfredo, strumming a guitar, singing corridos. Corridos are love songs. So he left his wife and children back in Salina Cruz, Oaxaca. But he always dreamed of bringing them north, at least to Tijuana. Well, one day it was too wet to plow in the tomato field, so he stood on El Camino Real and a roofer picked him up. And over the subsequent weeks and months, Philip Curry found him to be an incredible employee. He would never get back in the truck at the end of the day before changing his clothes. And here he's roofing, you know, in one of North San Diego County's toniest little enclaves up in Oceanside. And he became a manager. He became so good at his job. And he learned English. He taught himself English. And Diana and I were at the citizenship ceremony at the convention center in San Diego, among the hundreds of other people. Well, but Wilfredo couldn't afford to live in San Diego. He didn't want to live in that little shack again. He brought his wife and children to Tijuana, so he would commute every day from North San Diego County down to his little colonia in Tijuana. So I said, Wilfredo, I'll take you as far as the border, but can I make a portrait of you at the fence? Now, a portrait is one of those categories in photojournalism where you can interject, where you can tell the subject what you'd like to see, where to stand, and so forth. Otherwise, I don't interfere with any of my. In the packet with his newly minted citizenship certificate was this little flag. Everybody got that. So I asked him if he would please stand there at the fence and look back. And he said, yeah, I snuck through, just up the hill. So we're at the end of the fence. Playas Tijuana's on the other side. And the first person who congratulated him after that picture was the man who fixes the holes in the fence. Sometimes I can't not believe the things that happen. Well, Wilfredo being an upstanding man, he would upgrade his house. So in one of the homes that were being remodeled, that he did the roofing on, they gave him the toilet. So we went down to his colonia in the hills about a mile south of the U.S.-Mexico border, where he took me in to see his children. And I want you to look carefully. Let's see, it's hard to read the names in red. Andrea, the name Alma, and Eric is down in the lower right corner. I want you to take a look at those children's faces, because 20 years later, here they are again. So Wilfredo and his father asked me if I would photograph the eldest son's wedding, which was held at a nice wedding venue in Vista. These people know how to party. Well, earlier I mentioned that so many things that we enjoy in the service industry are rooted in the immigrant labor, like the flowers in Carlsbad, like the parks in Irvine, like the fancy-ass jeans out of LA, like the fancy houses in Irvine, and the beautiful hotels, the clean hotels in Orange County, and the food that you eat.
I don't see why many legislators argue that we are taking jobs away from Americans. It's a fact that whenever they try to come in and do the work, I mean, they just can't do it. When some Hispanics had already picked 12, 13 boxes, this American came up to me, he had picked 3 boxes.
It feels really tiring and it's hot, and I prefer to work from McDonald's, but I feel weak, tired, ready to go home and relax for a little bit.
Well, here's a guy who does work at McDonald's. He's an immigrant from Oaxaca, polishing the golden arches. But he sends his money back to his wife in Oaxaca. Well, my idea was to try to trace where that check goes, what it buys, what it looks like. Everything I do can't be done on the telephone. I can't ask somebody for a quote. I have to see it. So I wanted to see his check, see his cash, go down hundreds or thousands of miles. So the Mexico Express remittance company said, yeah, we'll give you all the locations you need. So my editors agreed that would be a good story. So I went with Isidro Mata to a remittance house at Mexico Express, where every 2 weeks he'll send $300 back to his grandmother in Oaxaca. So by the time the company told me the schedule for that group of checks from Los Angeles, and so I met the dispatcher at the airport, and he threw all his hundreds of these money orders, no cash money orders in the satchel, and we rode together on this little motorcycle. I thought I was going to die from deep vein thrombosis. But a long way up at the destinations were just heartwarming. So earlier I said I try to show the same story in more than one way. Well, here's a woman, Maria, she's over 80 years old, signing for her money order from the delivery driver. But I also said I think the story is better shown in the eyes and the faces of the people, like this is. So she was born as well as the boy who sent the money in this adobe house in Panandicado, Mexico. Well, this man here, he harvests lettuce in Salinas. He works his fingers to the bone, and he sends money back to his little village where his wife was back home. But what his wife never told him was she was saving all of the money along with other women in this village, Ioquesco, Oaxaca, and they bought land, they bought ground, and they planted nopal cactus. And they eventually got enough money to build a bottling plant in the background. So the farm workers, tried to come home every year, but as immigration became a little tighter on the border, sometimes they go 2 or 3 years and not come home. And when he did come home, the business was in full swing. So the women in the town in Ioquesco are harvesting it, and they're going to bottle, pickle the nopales and export them. So hopefully this group of women will, their men and children and grandchildren can come home and not have to leave anymore. And it's reasonably successful. It is working. So see what happened to that money that was sent back home? Surprised me. So they do have a label, they have a name. It's called the Women Bottlers of Nopal Cactus. It's salted in brine. Very tasty, like pickles. Nopal cactus are one of the staples in Mexican cuisine. All right. Well, one of the most lethal, dangerous, long migratory routes that I followed in all of my 45 years covering this issue was from Central America to the U.S.-Mexico border. And the reasons so many people are coming specifically from Honduras and El Salvador is because of the gang warfare. And the MS-13 gang, the Mara Salvatrucha gang, was a subject I wanted to get close to, so I hired fixers. Those were local journalists who knew everything about law enforcement and gang warfare, and they were no help. They said, yeah, we'll take you around, but we're not going to stop. I said, you got to stop. I said, well, MS-13 at least gives me a symbol. I know I may not be able to interview a gangster. I said, okay, I'm going to count to 15. You get out, and if you don't get back in, I'm leaving without you. Because there are snitches in all the houses, and they're looking for anything untoward, anything odd. And a guy with a camera is really, really odd. Probably more threatening than a guy with a gun. So anyway, we also had a line on a boy who tried to go to the border, and he was arrested in El Paso along with his friend. So they came back, they were deported. So here this boy, and I'm sorry I can't remember his name, I can't remember everyone, but in his arms for this managed portrait, he's clutching a Bible he said he carried all the way to El Paso and all the way when he was returned. Now his parents know that if it's detected that he left, he didn't want to join the gang, that he very well might be killed. So they put up barbed wire on the top of the entry to their house to protect him, and he seldom goes out. He doesn't play soccer with the gangsters. And he told me the story that when they came back, they rounded the corner to his friend, and he rounded the corner to their street, and they were confronted by the gangsters. And they shot his friend in the head, right then and there. So he ran, he managed to escape. So it's real, it's not only a threat, oh yeah, we keep hearing about gangsters. Well, here's a boy who's witnessed it, who saw it, and he was scared to death. Why would he want to come to the United States? You would, I would. I wouldn't want to live like that. There are villages in Oaxaca that are completely abandoned. Here are the local police. Because the cartel drug dealers are so lethal and so demanding. So I asked my reporter, how can I see evidence that parents are exporting their children to the South Texas border? He said, well, they're hiring, they're paying the cartel smugglers, they're going by bus, they're going by train, they're flying them. But at one point in time, there were 63,000 children under the age of 18 on the South Texas border. It was a humanitarian crisis. I think this was under George Bush. And all the outcry about migration and all the stress and strain, some of it is true. And that was true. So I asked my fixer, how can I see this? And he said, go to the local morgue. You'll see it every single day. So I stepped into the chapel at the San Pedro Sula city morgue, and there was this couple crying in the pews. So I sat down next to the man in the green shirt, and he was holding these pictures of this little 7-year-old girl. And he told me why they were there. He said, this is the grandparents. The parents of this little girl, Liliana, couldn't bear to come retrieve her body that was shot through the heart the day before by a gangster. So they came to pick up the little body that was grossly disfigured by an autopsy. I mean, I could clearly see the bullet hole through her left nipple. Why did they have to slice her open like a big sailmaker's cut, all stitched up with... But anyway, it was one of the saddest things, and it began to rain. Everyone was crying. The aunt and uncle, or the grandparents, they brought her first communion dress and clothed the body. And this became a metaphor so to speak, for those who were leaving, those children who were leaving. We had journalists at the Texas border photographing that scene, but my idea was to try to come up with how can we, ethically and cleanly show, not clean, that's a terrible word, how can we show what's chasing children out of Honduras? Well, when they laid this little girl's body in the coffin, like I said, it was raining. I could hardly see through the camera, through my tears. This is probably the most emotional image I've ever seen. But they put the body in the little wood casket, put it in the back of the pickup truck on which I'm standing, and drove away. And by that time, I was emotionally exhausted. I thought about going with the family up into their home for the wake and the burial the next day, but I couldn't take it. So this picture ran on the front page, and it did say a lot, and it got a lot of reactions. And I've shown it in museums and in lectures, and I didn't expect this to happen. At the Oceanside Museum of Art, this mother was explaining to this little girl what this picture was about. It's hard exhibiting pictures in a public forum when we don't know, when I don't know the age group of people are going to see them. So the mother later told me, Angel is the girl's name, Angel reached out to touch the picture, and she said, I just want to say goodbye. Is that killer or what? Shit. Somehow she was given the information that the little girl had passed. I just want to say goodbye. Well, goodbyes are all over the area I was in northeastern Honduras, including this mother who said, I'm getting my little boy out of here after her mother was shot by gangsters. So the father was going to stay behind. He had a business. They're in the bus station in San Pedro Sula, and they want to drive to the Guatemala border and hire a smuggler. Well, along the way, the U.S. Had trained Honduran police to set up checkpoints to stop this incredible migration that caused what I explained was that human rights crisis on the Rio Grande River. They would check IDs, and they wanted to see if they knew the names of their parents, if their parents would come forward. Well, this woman was stopped because there was a new law saying you have to have a passport for your child, and that had never been enforced before. So they kicked her off. She was right up, she's only feet from the Guatemala border, and she confided in my reporter and I that, well, we'll hire a smuggler. And the smuggler wanted $25 to walk around into Guatemala, and she only had $15. The $15 may have changed her life because her sister was going to meet her in Mexico City and bring her to Los Angeles. But I could not intervene, and it was hard. So she went back home. She did not want her children to do what these children have to do in Tegucigalpa, is scavenge in the dump for something to eat or something to sell on the side of the road. So this was an incredible scene. It's hot and muggy, and I'm tromping around on this fresh pile of trash in this massive dump. Every step I took kicked up a fog of flies. Buzzards were raining guano down like hail. And everybody was competing for something with these two little boys. Well, Enrique was the main subject of the 6-part series in the LA Times describing how children go north on the trains through Mexico, hopefully to find their mothers in the north. Well, this is Enrique's paternal grandmother, Maria. So we're sitting together, and the reporter is taking notes. But usually an interview is a terrible place to make a photograph. But I'm sitting on a log in front of Maria, and she can see out across the valley of Tegucigalpa. And she just And this says it all, I think, because she said, Enrique used to sit next to me all the time and we would talk about his dreams about going to find his mother in North Carolina. And she warned him, don't, you better not ride those trains. Children die every day. And he kept badgering her. So from the chair where the cat is, she said, okay, Enrique, I'm going to give you all the money I have. Go safely. And that was $17. So he made his way on the bus to the Guatemala border. And when he got to the Guatemala border, this is not Enrique, but this is a mural at a Catholic shelter on the Rio Suchiate, which defines the border between South Mexico and North Guatemala. So the pilgrims going north, almost like Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, it's an incredibly important or interesting or revealing mural, because it's a rite of passage for children and so many people in countries to our south, where they leave their roots and go to the great fence line in the north and hopefully find a better life. This is the river. If you look carefully on the upper part of the picture, there's a bridge, that brown line. That's the official port of entry, which those who want to sneak around the Mexican border ride these rafts, which cost 50 cents each. So I rode one across from that shelter. And I jumped out. The raft I rode on is in the lower left. The raft captain was hauling his float out. Now, in the newspaper business, sometimes pictures run small, and this was an important one. It was a transition. It was an interface between Central America and Mexico. So the graphics of this appealed to me and my editors. The picture only ran what they call 2 columns, which is that wide. But it worked because it helped illustrate where we are on this long, long journey. So many kids don't know where to go. They don't know, they're penniless, they're starving. By the time they cross the river, they go to another shelter. I heard this boy's tracing the lines of the railroad track that are going to lead to the north. So it's in the rail yard in Tapachula, Chiapas, the most southerly state in Mexico, where I encountered a lot of children and adults, and no women. I've never saw a single woman, but I was only looking for children under the age of 18. I was not with Enrique, the namesake of the story, Enrique's Journey. He had already made it to the north part of Mexico. It's almost impossible to follow one child because they fall off the train, they get injured, they get arrested, they get deported, they get lost, or they get disinterested. So I am following Enrique's route, mile by mile by mile, encountering other children doing the same thing. So getting on the train was one of the most dangerous things that you can do. And a little 12-year-old boy who you'll see later, named Dennis, he told me, Mr. Don, you don't, in Spanish, he didn't speak English, but he said, never get on the last ladder like this boy is doing. He says, because if you slip off, the wheels are right there. You can see the wheels between his legs. He said, the beast, La Bestia, they call the train, will grind you up and cut you to pieces. He said, get on the first ladder, then you have a greater distance to crawl out from beneath the train. So when there are tank cars, the ladder, the only ladder to get on, is in the middle of the train. And this is the safest place to hide from the Mara Salvatrucha gangsters, which essentially run the train lines. They're not establishing the schedule, but they're on there and they're robbing these children and adults as they ride, sometimes for 8 or 10 hours on the train. The safest one is a tank car because nobody can jump from one tank car to the other while the train is in motion. But the train car is greasy, super slippery, and it's 90 degrees and probably 90% humidity. So if you slip off here, you're screwed, like little Carlos. He fell off. Mercifully, I never saw an amputation or a death from a child or anybody falling off. But it was part of the list of things that were important to tell this story. So I would go from Red Cross shelters to clinics and see if there were any patients. And this is where I found this boy. He said his parents had come to pick him up, but he had fallen off, just like this picture here. See the left leg? He slipped off and it went wham right on the track, and the wheels cut his leg off and half of his right foot. Another lesson I learned was the first time I got on a train, the migrants were singing this, what I thought was a tropical happy song called Loma, Loma, Loma. And I said, Rama, Rama, and then bam, I got hit in the back of the head with a branch. Branches, it became a very significant part of the story because children, when the train is barreling through the Chiapas jungle, low-hanging branches will cut skin, tear eyes out, knock children or anybody clear off the track or train. So I was ready. When I heard it the next time, that song, I pre-focused, I pre-composed, and I laid my head down and mashed the shutter as a motor drive. Go, got as many images as I could at a slow shutter speed so you could see that we're in motion, the blur of the greenery. And then edited for this one. And this shows little Dennis Contreras, 12 years old on the right in the white t-shirt, Santo Antonio Gamay in the stripes. You're going to see both of them there again. This is what I call the Pilgrim Train, and it was a description that an undercover Mexican police force told me. He said, you know, Don, you're going to look back someday and you're going to see all these faces looking north. And it's one of the few times I used a telephoto lens. Wide-angle lenses see a greater degree, and I can get close to my subject. I can relate the background. I can hear them. I can talk to them. I'm not telling them what to do, but you become more intimate, more familiar. But a telephoto lens, in this case, I was trying to stack up these faces that are all looking north. They're not looking back. And when occasionally the train would stop, and I had made multiple trips on this rail line, so I knew the train had stopped to change engineers, not for an immigration checkpoint. And you can see the boy, he's in the deep shadow in the right center. He probably knew too that this is not an immigration checkpoint. But across the top of the train, you hear this pounding of feet, and people were flying across like birds, trying to get to the back of the train, thinking there was immigration, or Mexican immigration at the head of the train. A little 12-year-old Dennis and I were looking down. The train is rocking and it's slowing down. And Dennis told me, La Migra is ahead, La Migra Mexicana. So I looked down, and this man, who I later identified himself as Santo Antonio Gamay, trying to go to Canada, to Ontario, where he's a painter. He came home for his father's funeral. Anyway, I'm looking down, and he puts his hands out and leans his head back and opens his opens his mouth. And it was like this jolt, this kick in my head. I was actually looking, and I momentarily froze. I said, Don, you've got to push the shutter now, push it now. So I couldn't hear if he was screaming, yelling, praying, crying, what he was doing. But he did later tell me, yeah, I was praying that this train wouldn't stop and they wouldn't arrest me for a third time. We're about 200 miles north of the border with Guatemala, up in, so the train definitely stops, people run away. The locals are sick and tired of people begging for water and food. So they point out where the migrants are, and they were all arrested, as was Enrique at this very place. A little 11-year-old boy on the left, a 13-year-old in the middle. So they're put on then the bus of tears, El Bus de Lágrimas, and driven 200 miles back to the Guatemala border. So I didn't try to hide who I was as a journalist when inevitably people would come up to me and say, who are you? And I would always explain, I'm a journalist from a big American newspaper. What you're doing is life-changing. It's changing my country, it's changing yours. And all I want to do is watch. If you'll let me observe you, I promise to show the truth. And it was confusing to some people. You know, some would say, take my picture, others would run away. And one man asked me, you know, nobody gives a shit about us. Nobody pays attention to us except two kinds of people, the police and the priests. The police rob us and the priests try to protect us. So I explained that, you know, I'm right down the middle. I can't help you and I can't hurt you. So, you know, I had that song and dance that I memorized in Spanish, and everybody understood it, and nobody tried to hurt me or something. So here we're crossing over in one of the smoothest places of hundreds of miles of track that goes through this mushy tropical roadbed where the train rocks back and forth. They call it the iron worm because every train car is swinging the opposite way from the one ahead. So it kind of wiggles its way through the jungle. But here I'm crossing a trestle bridge and it was smooth and I could stand up to give the reader a sense of place. This is where we are. This is where we're going. And up ahead, bounding out of a coffee plantation through was these horse riders. And it began to get a lot of noise coming from the train. Kids on the train and the adults were screaming and whistling, and it became a horse race. So my camera was set at a slow shutter speed to give you that blurred look, and pretty soon the horse was going the same speed as the iron horse. So, but I'm desperately trying to hold the camera and keep the focus and keep the composition. And I never saw this picture until I got back to the newspaper. It's one that has a lot of information in it. And I mean, it's endearing. It's universally appealing. It's not about badness. It's not ugliness. It's pure joy. And the editorial value of the picture was the people on the train were relieved for a few seconds from their terrible trip of agony and potential danger. So the picture was used very, very big in the museum. The museum is a now closed museum in Washington, D.C., dedicated to news gathering. Well, along this route, the legend that I learned from people that I interviewed on the Rio Grande border in southern Texas and northern Mexico were the food throwers of Veracruz. And sure enough, we found Maria. She was she was one, just about everybody knew who it was. So I found her. So Maria says, if I have 2 tortillas, I'll give 1 to the boys on the train. So here she's stuffing a sandbag or a grain bag with fresh tortillas. See, she says when she hears the train whistle blowing, she gives the bag of tortillas to her daughter because she said, I'm too old. I said, well, how old are you? She said, oh, I'm 130 years old. I said, well, during the interview, an hour or so before this, she told stories of the Mexican Revolution. Well, we published her age as somewhere around 100, but she was gorgeous. I said, well, how old is your daughter? She said 70. So her daughter scurries down a little pathway and tosses these tortillas like frisbees. I didn't see that. The train didn't come along during when I was there, but her story was an important part of confirming the food throwers, as was this little guy who on the left giving oranges to the boys passing. I call it gift for a northbound migrant. This is why I do photojournalism, because it has 2 seldom found characteristics, subject and style. The substance of the picture is obviously the gift, and it happens to be miraculously sharp as a tack. And the style is the shutter speed, slow shutter speed. I'm panning with the train as it goes by. So it was another magic moment to help me translate that yarn, that tradition, that legend about the food throwers into a picture. So seldom do I, occasionally I have to step back just to show the whole scene. So the train is coming up to a stop in Veracruz. And after it leaves Veracruz, it goes up 5,000 feet into Mexico City. It takes all night, 10 hours, go through dozens of tunnels where it's bitter cold. Bitter cold might be 50 degrees or 40 degrees, but for people who are born and raised in the tropics of Honduras, no Mexicans ride the train, they can take buses, but the Central Americans are not accustomed to coldness. So the train stopped for a mechanical breakdown and everybody jumped off and picked up garbage, and once it got underway, they were burning a fire on the moving train. So here's the same setup, the same scene, two different ways. Here I stepped across the coupler to look back at the same boy, the same fire. But this is a composition I'd used numerous times in other pictures. It's, the perspective is similar, the slow shutter speed. So for a layout in a newspaper or a magazine, I wanted to give my editors a lot of choices. So they did choose this one. And it's nice because it's daybreak. You can see the warm sky in the background. And then this happened. Right at the crack of dawn, I climbed up and I peeked over the top of one of these grain cars. They're called hopper cars. And those little windows, those portholes, is where grain, cement, or gravel is loaded. So 3 cars ahead, I could see this little tiny silhouette of a person. So I ran across the gaps of 3 freight cars. Now, I had been doing this for 2.5 months, so I was pretty good at keeping safe, moving around on a moving train, climbing the ladders, jumping between the cars. So I come up behind this boy, and this is actually what I'd been looking for 2.5 months. It's the metaphor for not Enrique, but a child traveling alone towards an uncertain horizon, around a curve, towards the north. And I'm sure this boy doesn't know where he's going. But he's going to stay on that train. He's dirty. He was a young boy. So once the train gets up to the northern part of Mexico, as Enrique did, in fact, this is where I met Enrique, on the southern bank of the Rio Grande River. Texas is on the other side. And I met 2 other little boys, Aidin and Hermes, 2 junior high buddies, 13 and 12 years old, who had come north looking for a brother and a mother. But they had been beaten up by Mexican drunks on they were still on the Mexican side, so they hid in this culvert that goes underneath the Riverside Highway and drains into the Rio Grande. Well, I told you I don't interfere with my subjects. It's not the way ethical photojournalism is done. We cannot pay, manipulate, or feed anybody. But I was worried because little Aidin, it was a cold night. His buddy burning trash to keep warm, but he's sweating his ass off, and he's got a blistering headache, and you can see the knot on his forehead where he'd been hit with a 2x4 before he was able to hide. So I stayed with him. I said, if he passes out, I will get help. And the next morning I took him to a clinic in Nuevo Laredo, Tamaulipas, Mexico. And pharmacies are much like clinics in our country, where in Mexico the pharmacist will give, a cursory examination. And I bought him antibiotics and painkillers. And then I vowed never to see him or photograph or look for him and his buddy again. But there comes a time when the cameras must go down. So like Enrique, crossed the Rio Grande here, and I did numerous times, but I didn't get out on the other side because I didn't want the momentum of my project to be interrupted by the Border Patrol wondering who I was, because even for a passport holder like me, I cannot enter the United States through any non-port of entry. So I would always get out and walk around on the bridge. But the story continued up north through the South Texas desert, where I was able to link up with a Border Patrol pilot who denied my request 3 times until I told him, I've flown these helicopters. I don't care about it. There's no door. I don't want a door. I'm a Vietnam vet, an infantry officer. I can fly in these. And he was impressed. He said, okay. Well, we bonded over that, and he flew me all along the Rio Grande River, where they were looking for smugglers, looking for people crossing the river, and they happened upon this group that was captured by Border Patrol trackers. They look for signs of passage through the desert. Some of the signs of passage are reported by ranchers who say, well, we've got a dead body. Because what will happen is 60 miles north of the border of Brownsville, there's a Border Patrol checkpoint, much like we have at Camp Pendleton. So smugglers will stop their vehicle and tell the people to walk around. But walking through this sand is 130 degrees. And almost every week, a body is found. And they call this the corridor of death. That was pretty grim. And so many people were died, unidentified. Many Central Americans will not carry an ID because if they're caught, they don't want to be deported back to Central America. They'll claim they're Mexican, so they get deported back to a northern state in Mexico, and they'll make another attempt to come across. Well, Enrique made it to North Carolina. He didn't walk through that hot, blistering sand. His mother hired a smuggler and came down to South Texas. He swam across the river, and they linked up, and they made it to Clayton, North Carolina, where I linked up with him. I didn't see his smuggler. I didn't see that part of it, but we kept in touch with the mother, Lourdes. Well, I want to end this part of the journey with a little 12-year-old boy I met in his bedroom in Tapachula, Chiapas, the most southerly part of Mexico on the Guatemala border, where he had just woken up in his bedroom. He came from this muddy little colonia in San Pedro Sula, but he woke up in this freight car. So he slept on a bag. His mattress was gravel, where he had been making many attempts to go north on the trains. And it was the cutest little boy, had a squeaky voice, taught me how to roll my R's. He said, you know, I want to go to the United States, I want to learn English, I want to help the children who are lost. And he showed me in a little matchbox. He had 3 little coins that he had told me he begged on the street, and underneath was this little piece of grocery bag folded up. And he said, this is where my mother lives. She lives in the state of Los Angeles. That's where I'm going. And I noticed the phone number had an area code 619. So I knew he was going not to Los Angeles, but to San Diego. And most migrants had no idea where they were going, where their relatives were. Many of them told me, yeah, I'll cross the Rio Grande and I'll just wait there and my mother or father will show up. So Dennis taught me how to tame the beast. The beast is, La Bestia is the name, that the moniker that's given to this train. Dennis was a clever boy. He was a good beggar. He was just very well deported, very kind, and always well dressed. I know every time I saw him, and I would lose him for days, and he would show up again because, like I explained earlier, I couldn't travel with one person very long. They would get lost, fall off, arrested, like Dennis was. So his friends liked Dennis because he would always be able to successfully beg food. But they didn't like him because they said, you know, Dennis always falls asleep. Well, it's a cold night, and we're sleeping on top of a petrochemical car, probably has cooking oil or heating oil or gasoline, but it's still warm from the blistering hot South Mexico sunlight. But the train is rocking back and forth. So it's like a cradle for the kid. But notice where his left leg is. It's hooked around the ladder on the side of the tank car, so he never fell off. But here's early morning, and Dennis, once again, he's got a new outfit. When the train stopped not for an immigration checkpoint, and he knew it because he had gone through here several times, successfully begging, always good at it. Well, I caught up to Dennis in San Diego. Here he's in his mother's apartment in North Park. His mother cleans offices in Sorrento Valley at night, and in the daytime she sells tamales on her street. Well, Dennis Dennis didn't know what it was like to be in the North, where everything he ever dreamed of or saw on TV was right there for the picking. So his mother said, you know, he wouldn't go to school. He stopped going to school. He got in trouble. He went to parties. So she deported him back to Mexico. Well, Dennis was not satisfied with that. So he called me one day at the LA Times and said, Donato, I'm back. I'm good now. I helped my mother. She's all right with me, and I got a good job as a landscaper. So I met him down in La Jolla, where he was part of a crew of landscapers. Always well-dressed. Very, very handsome boy. But he was deported again. His immigration status caught up to him. The circumstances that are too lengthy to explain. But his mother left him to go to Los Angeles when he was 18 months old. She eventually moved to North Carolina because the mother told me that I didn't want to stay in California because there's too many Mexicans here. I can't get a job. So I moved to North Carolina, where there's a huge contingent of Hondurans. So Dennis once again was deported, and I was invited back to Honduras to give some lectures, and I caught up with Dennis. This is his old muddy neighborhood where the street has been paved, but on his chest he has his sister's name, Sandra. Sandra raised him from age 18 months. Sandra was a nurse at a local hospital. The last time I talked to Dennis, he had bought a house in Honduras, in San Pedro Sula. He had a job at a telecommunications company. You'll never believe this. He said, Don, my client is the Boston Herald. He said, when people complain about their newspapers wet or didn't show up, they call me. And he's down in Honduras, speaking perfectly unaccented English. Well, we published the series over 6 days, not consecutive days, and republished all of the 63 images in one volume on very high quality newsprint. All right, I'm going to end it with deportation. It's big in the news. When men are deported across to Mexico, especially here in Mexicali, there's a hotel called the Hotel of the Deported Migrant, where this guy was a cook in a restaurant in Laguna Beach. Said he'd been a cook for 8 years. So when he was deported, there was a raid in the kitchen, deported him across the border from Calexico. He became the cook at the shelter.
My name is Eduardo Plasencia. I work in Torrance, California, in the animal hospital. I was making $24 an hour. It's like I'm a Mexican, I'm illegal in my own country because I don't have papers. It's hard, too hard.
So it's not always a clean story. It's not always one that can be published as a statistic, as a political soapbox scream. It's always confusing and different. So in the shelter, the floor is paved with, carpeted with deportees, including this man who, this is his words.
Es triste, como un padre como yo, es un dolor muy grande, nomás con tan solo pensarlo, se rompen corazones, ilusiones.
So I asked Bernardo, who had lived in Riverside for 18 years when his work site, his construction site, was raided and he was deported. Well, I asked him, can I go see your family in Riverside? And he gave me the address where they, in their apartment, they have an altar set up in his honor. Because the breadwinner is gone, the mother and the children make tamales that they sell in the apartment house. And a little girl came up to him and said, Mister, come look at me. Come here. I have this magic flashlight. So all over the house, in the bathroom, the garage, on the edge of the kitchen counter, she showed me with her black light, said, I love Dad. Well, Dad did make it home. He eventually crossed the border. It took him 2 weeks walking. By the time he got home, he hadn't had enough water. He was having kidney problems, but he made it home to his wife and children. Yeah, we got to build the wall. We have to enforce the law. I'm not trying to promote open borders, closed borders, or any borders, but they're there, and that's the subject that we're looking at. There are all kinds of protests, both for and against migration. And the wall is being built everywhere, even out in the Arizona desert. But there's always a ladder that's just a couple of feet taller. I did a story after I retired for the San Diego Union, which is exactly what I observed. Throughout most of my career, migrants would run away from the Border Patrol. During the last 5 years or so of the Biden administration and the Trump administration, migrants were running towards the Border Patrol because there's a dictum in the Constitution that says once you're on American soil, you can apply for asylum. So the legions of people were being led by Mexican cartel smugglers through the desert, even up here to Jacamba, where a mother and child is coming around the end of the fence. I want to describe why this fence doesn't work. Here is a drone shot of the Colorado River, one of the few places that runs north and south along the edge of Arizona. The fence is built 200 or 300 yards inside the United States. So the smugglers would bring their charges across the river, and they're automatically in the U.S., so they can apply for asylum. And it was controlled anarchy. So controlled that the Border Patrol sector chief here in south of Yuma set up a shade shelter, brought in water, portable bathrooms. People were, lined up. They would photograph their passports. A lot of people had documents. They had passports. And they would make their claim for asylum, including this woman who was a ballerina from Cuba. She said she fled Cuba because she had said something bad about the government. The word got out. Now, I'm not going to translate this for you because her emotions say it all.
Venido de sorpresa. Adiós.
So she had walked for 3 days from Mexicali to Yuma because the Mexican bus drivers were told, do not let anybody who's not Mexican on the bus. So she and hundreds of other people walked along the borderline highway 3 days. And she's talking to a relative in another state. I can't remember which state. But what I missed in my recording was what she first said. She said, Mama, soy en los Estados Unidos. I said, I'm in. God, I couldn't believe it. Oh, fuck, I missed that. But, I did want to show that the gratification, the expectation of a better life may be starting here, or it may not. And it is not anymore. Now the U.S. Army is along the borderline fence. This is the same spot where the ballerina crossed across, where these guys are warming themselves. See the fence in the background? The lights are on the south, on the Mexican side. So now it's closed. It's stopped. There is nothing. The only good picture you can make now along the U.S.-Mexico border is a landscape. There are no people. It's essentially stopped. Thank you very much.